Antony Blinken has been traveling around the Middle East of late because Israel is on a rampage. Israel has killed over 10,000 Palestinians, over 3,000 children, bombing hospitals, bombing schools. It is an absolute nightmare for Palestine right now, and it's a PR nightmare for the United States. Not because the United States isn't in unconditional solidarity with Israel. We've seen Joe Biden, Linda Thomas Greenfield veto the UN resolution for a ceasefire. We know that the United States doesn't disagree with what Israel does. We know that the United States is Israel's biggest backer, but that's not the point. The point is it's an election season. There's a lot on the line for the Biden administration. And this comes as there's one blunder after another for the foreign policy establishment, especially with regard to Ukraine. Now that Ukraine is winding down, there's talks of US officials giving the little elbow to Zelensky, saying it's time for a peace plan. There is nothing good about an open air public massacre of the Palestinian people, but that is what is happening. Even if the United States agrees with it in secret, it does not want such a thing to become worldwide attention. It does not want worldwide attention on it, but that is what has happened. And so Antony Blinken is attempting to play damage control. And how is he doing this? Well, first, he went to Israel, and I'm going to show you what he posted and what Politico is reporting. So here is Antony Blinken's Twitter page. He said he met with senior Israeli leadership today. That was November 3rd. Israel has a right to defend itself against terrorism and ensure this never happens again. We discussed concrete steps that can and should be taken to protect civilians. So Antony Blinken talking about protecting civilians is pretty rich, given that the United States has been in unconditional solidarity with Israel from the very beginning of its bombing campaign. But the hypocrisy isn't the point here. The point here is that there are indications that the United States is trying to gain and wrestle control of the situation, whether it is genuine or not, whether it is possible or not. Both could definitely be out of reach. So the U.S. asked Israel to avoid killing civilians, says Politico. Washington is reportedly pushing hard after the Jabalia bombing. So Israel's bombing of a refugee camp, one of the biggest in Gaza, killing over, I believe it was 400 Palestinians in two fell swoops, I guess you could say, because it was two huge and massive strikes. That is what is prompting Washington to grow increasingly uncomfortable with the civilian death toll in Gaza, requesting an explanation from Israel for one of the airstrikes of the densely populated Jabalia refugee camp, says Politico. The request was in context of asking Israel to do more to avoid civilian casualties. A U.S. official granted anonymity to discuss sensitive conversation, told Politico. Washington has also asked for details on the thinking and process behind the strike and urged Israel to conduct precision targeting to avoid harming civilians. Now, look, this is really political theater because, let's be honest, the United States had the ability to do this. The neocons, if they cared about, do the neocons care about civilians? No, they don't. Do they care about civilians in Iraq? No, they did not. Do they care about all the Ukrainian civilians that were forced to join the Ukrainian armed forces to go out to the front line and die on behalf of NATO? No, they didn't care. Do they care about civilians anywhere in the world, whether it's Latin America, whether it's Asia, Africa, Libya, Syria? No, they don't care about civilians. So, of course, it's theater, but it's theater that is important because it shows us that there is a public relations nightmare at the foot of the United States' door. So, visiting Israel on Friday, Antony Blinken told reporters that he would urge Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to pursue a pause in the fighting and gave him advice about reducing civilian casualties. I mean, can you imagine that conversation? What does that even look like? What are you even talking about? What advice are you giving? Antony Blinken has never waged a war. Netanyahu, to his credit, has basically waged a war on Palestinians almost every other year since he's been a politician, which is many decades now in Israel. But that's not, I don't think, a badge of honor, given that what that means is that he has literally been responsible for the murder of tens of thousands of Palestinians at this point. So while it's not a badge of honor, is to say it's interesting. It's Antony Blinken giving Netanyahu advice when Antony Blinken is not just completely ignorant of the ways of war, but also he is a terrible diplomat, a terrible Secretary of State. I mean, I said this on Twitter that I don't know how he became worse than Hillary Clinton, but this Palestine situation has essentially sowed that ranking for him. He is below Hillary Clinton, believe it or not, in effectiveness, because while Hillary Clinton was a war criminal, the queen of war crimes, as to paraphrase Tulsi Gabbard, while she definitely was that, could you imagine Hillary? I mean, I could imagine Hillary Clinton in 2016 as president pushing for war with Russia, but as Secretary of State under Obama, she had to stand next to Sergei Lavrov with the whole reset button. She had to play a game. She had to play tough with China, but also say, well, we need to work with China. She was a better diplomat than Antony Blinken. Believe it or not. That's not saying she was a good one. All right. That's not saying much at all. It is to say, though, that Antony Blinken is just the worst of the worst. So the U.S. urged Israel to conduct more surgical operations instead of a full-scale invasion of Gaza, citing civilian and IDF casualties, the potential of them, the anonymous official told Politico, but Netanyahu only partially heeded the advice. So anyway, they're just going to get into how many people have died, the Jabalia camp bombing, the damage from that. But I want to read you now what the New York Times had to say, because I think it's even worse than partial. I think Netanyahu, and here's the thing, it was probably all theater, right? It was probably all theater. It was never supposed to be something that meant much. But even the optics of Netanyahu rebuffing Blinken does make the United States look weak. It makes it look like Israel is the one pulling the punches. And of course, it's not Netanyahu is vulnerable politically to a certain extent, but let's be honest. Netanyahu has been in politics. I don't understand. We're talking, there's a lot of talk about Israel's internal political situation, which I am no expert on. But I do know Netanyahu has literally been in the game since the 1990s, if not before. I remember him co authoring the Clean Break Doctrine, which essentially is the outline for Israel's foreign policy, even beyond Palestine. This guy has been in politics for many, many years, prime minister, president, etc., etc. So to think that Netanyahu has anything to worry about when it comes to Blinken, who has been the Secretary of State for less than 4 years, and who knows, he could be very well out in 2024, is laughable. So here it says that Netanyahu appears to rebuff Blinken's request for humanitarian pauses. So that's what they're calling it. They're not calling it a ceasefire, okay? They're calling it humanitarian pauses. There's not going to be a ceasefire for Gaza, for the conflict. A humanitarian pause is all that they'll say, because to use the word ceasefire is sacrilegious, because Israel demands all prisoners of war, what they call hostages, will be released before there can be anything changing. And they don't even promise anything will change, but they'll say before any policy will change with what Israel is doing, the hostages need to be released. So shortly after American Secretary of State visited Israel and asked the country to pause fighting to allow aid into Gaza, the Prime Minister of Israel said that a ceasefire would be contingent on the release of Israeli hostages, a tough stance that seemed to be a rebuff to Washington. Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel on Friday, called for serious humanitarian pauses to allow more deliveries of badly needed food, water, medicine, other supplies to Gaza, and also to facilitate the release of more than 200 hostages abducted from the deadly October 7 terrorist attacks Hamas launched from the enclave which it controls. I have made clear that we are continuing forcefully and that Israel refuses a temporary ceasefire that does not include the release of our hostages, Netanyahu said. He also stood fast on Israel's refusal to let fuel enter Gaza, needed to power hospitals and power desalination plants that provide drinking water, even as it allows in limited shipments of other vital supplies. Blinken told reporters in Tel Aviv that the United States stood in solidarity with Israel, but said that in meetings with Netanyahu and other leaders, he had emphasized it matters how Israel conducted its campaign to defeat Hamas. So, there you go. I've made clear we are continuing forcefully and that Israel refuses a temporary ceasefire that does not include the release of hostages. Essentially, this is going on for a while. You're not going to see any changes to this policy. So another failure, another diplomatic failure. And now Blinken is in Jordan trying to get the Arab countries to basically control their populations. You had Hezbollah's leader, Saeed Hassan Nasrallah, give a speech outlining Hezbollah's position. There was a lot of hope that Hezbollah would come out and essentially declare war on Israel. I always thought that was a bit naive, but that was the hope. And I'll just pull up a few highlights from the Cradle, a great source of information, by the way, the Cradle, on what Nasrallah said. I can't pull up the whole speech, but Hassan Nasrallah said about the Americans, your fleets do not scare us, nor have they ever, and we are all set for them. All options on the Lebanese front are open, all choices on the table. We may make the decision at any moment. The 7th of October attack was entirely a Palestinian operation. Whoever wants to stop a regional war must quickly stop the aggression on Gaza. So a completely different tone from Hezbollah, but you see there's some convergence here in terms of what the United States and Hezbollah want. They want, for different reasons, they want Israel to change its behavior. The United States wants Israel to change its behavior because the Biden administration does not want to lose any ground electorally should Israel complete its final solution extermination campaign under Biden's watch. I mean, think about this. If Gaza is ethnically cleansed 100%, which isn't necessarily I won't call it a fact of life. I won't say it's definitely going to happen, but it's not out of the realm of possibility given the scale of Israel's bombardment right now. If Israel successfully does this under Biden's watch, that's on Biden. That's on Biden, right? So that is on Joe Biden, and Joe Biden will forever have that on his record. And don't forget that there are many Arabs, many Muslims in the U.S. population that vote for Democrats. There are many of them. And so it would make a difference. If you think about Michigan, it could make a big difference on how voters vote. So Joe Biden does not want to see Gaza be completely wiped out, not because he cares about Palestinians, not because he cares about peace, but because he cares about the optics for an election. Now, for Hezbollah, it's completely different. Hezbollah is in solidarity with Palestine. Hezbollah has been struggling against Israel throughout the duration of this operation, beginning on October 8th, and has actually diverted a lot of Israel's resources to its border with Israel. However, Hezbollah does not want to see a regional war because that would mean, well, what do you think that would mean? That would mean a lot of casualties, a lot of damage, and it's not a surefire victory because the politics of the region are complex when you look at how the political regimes of the Arab nations and the Muslim Islamic nations, how they have taken shape in this period. So it's not a guaranteed victory. No matter what you think about the strength of Iran and Hezbollah, they are strong countries, but they're not operating on their own. They have to contend not just with whatever rabid um, nuclear situation the United States and Israel may put forth, but they also have to deal with the regional actors who are not necessarily to be trusted. So there's a lot that has to be taken into consideration, plus the fact that if a regional war happens, it essentially means the destruction of the global economy, which means multipolarity and economic integration and development essentially stops region wide. So Hezbollah wants Israel to stop and wants there to be pressure put to bear to get Israel to stop, but it is in a very difficult position. It can't just say let's all go to a war, a crusade on Israel right now, given that the consequences of that would be so dire for the entire region, and given that it is difficult to imagine such a scenario without complete overreach and overreaction from the Israeli side. Look at how Israel has responded to Hamas and the Palestinian resistance, how they have conducted themselves on October 7th. Look at that reaction. The reaction from Israel and the United States would be more. I mean, how many more fold than this, right? There would be an all out war in the region. It could go nuclear. So it is a very delicate situation. And it is only up to Hezbollah. It's up to forces like Hezbollah to take that into consideration, because it's only them, the progressive forces in the region, that care about both Palestinian lives and regional stability. Go figure. It's not the United States and it's not Israel. Israel has damn hell had a plan for decades and decades and decades, right? Since the 1980s, even before that, of destabilizing the entire region for its own expansionist ambitions, right? You get all these Zionists triggered about from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Well, Israel has wanted to expand itself from freaking Egypt into parts of Saudi Arabia. It's wanted a greater Israel that expands essentially throughout the Middle East and North Africa. So let's not act like Israel is some kind of good faith actor here, that it's some kind of victim. That is what we have to combat the most at this moment, because even in these attempts by the United States to wrestle control and stabilize the situation and give advice to Israel, it is still promoting Israel as some kind of victim nation when it is nothing of the sort. It is committing the most vile and heinous war crimes that we have ever witnessed in human history. Can you imagine that we're in this moment? It is one of the most, if we look at just the density, the scale of what's happening to Gaza, it is some of the worst war crimes that have ever happened in human history. It is to the level of what happened to the Vietnamese people. And I was just in Vietnam. It's to that level. The Vietnamese people were sprayed with Agent Orange, poisoned. I just visited so many families, so many people, generations affected by this dioxin poison that has destroyed the lives of so many. The unexploded ordinances. I saw these bombs. I saw them. I went to an organization that pulls up these bombs. I saw the damage that they've caused. And that's not even to mention the millions that were killed by these bombs. So, the United States, of course, is no stranger to these war crimes. But the point is that the scale of what's happening is at that level right now. The number of bombs that have been dropped on Gaza represent a magnitude of force bigger than the nuclear bombs dropped on Japan in World War II. That's how many bombs have been dropped on Gaza as of right now, and it hasn't even stopped. And it's not looking like it's going to stop anytime soon. So the neocons, Antony Blinken, they don't give a damn about Palestinian lives. They don't give a damn about peace, right? They don't care about anything except their narrow political ambitions. And that's why you have Antony Blinken trying to play damage control around the world. That's why he's trying to tell Netanyahu, scapegoating Netanyahu as if Netanyahu has not been a political ally of the United States from the very beginning, as if Netanyahu hasn't done exactly what the United States has hoped he would do, which is to continue Israel's role as a military outpost for the United States in the region. That is why the United States finds Israel such a compatible so-called ally, regardless of how Israel treats the U.S. political class. I had Scott Ritter on the program, and he brought up the point that Netanyahu was in the chambers of Congress giving a speech against the Democratic Party president for Donald Trump, essentially, and no one did a thing. They made a little fuss. Oh, why was he doing that? That was kind of offensive, but no one did a thing. Why? Because Israel essentially has political uh, control over the U.S. Congress. They have been bought and paid for. You should see the way Congress talks about Israel. People like Richie Torres of New York, you should see it, whose APAC is his biggest donor. This is what has happened to the United States political class. And it's not Israel necessarily pulling the strings of them. No, this is the political class being more than willing to get into business with Israel for the political and economic gains that it brings. They don't care what happens over there as long as Israel is playing the role it was meant to play since it was established first as a kind of replacement for the British Empire's control over the region. And then, of course, when the British Empire lost its colonial booty in after World War II, the United States, over a course of many decades, began to curry favor with Israel in order to do the same thing for itself in the modern era. And that's where we find ourselves now, with Israel conducting the most heinous evils on behalf of essentially U.S. hegemony, because Israel's never going to get its wishes. It's never going to expand from, Egypt to Saudi Arabia, wherever, that greater Israel, probably never going to happen. But as long as it has the ambitions, the United States knows it can rely on it to do what it's doing to the Palestinians, to be a kind of sower of chaos, and to be a buffer in the region to prevent any kind of integration and independence in the region, because everyone will have to focus on the heinous crimes of Israel and how to defend themselves, fight against them. It is the ball and chain, Israel is, to that region's prosperity and stability. And that is the truth. And that's why I get so frustrated when Palestine is talked about as this like little single issue, when the reality is what happens to Palestine is really what is happening to that entire region. There's a reason why this is going on now. There's a reason why the United States is actually more than willing to move its attention to the Middle East as the quagmire in Ukraine closes up into a loss for NATO. And it's because there is still business to do in the Middle East. There's still Iran, there's still Syria, there is still the question of Hezbollah and its influence over Lebanon and surrounding countries. There's still a lot of unfinished business in the Middle East, because the Middle East, especially the Arab countries, Iran, outside of the Arab countries, They are starting to move toward China, toward Russia, toward a multipolar future. They are looking for more economic development and peace. And there's nothing worse for that than Israel conducting a genocidal campaign against the Palestinian people. There's nothing worse than what is happening in Palestine for that. So the Palestinian people, of course, are the focus here. They're the focus of all these protests. They're the focus of people's attention, and they should be, because they're dying. They're the ones who are dying. We don't even know. There's still a lot to be verified with regard to the Israeli victims. We need to know a lot more. Haaretz came out with an article that showed less than 1,000 below the IDF number of 1,400 that were supposedly killed on the October 7th attack. But not only this, we know that Israel has been killing a lot of its own. We know that more hostages, or prisoners of war, we should call them, have been killed by Israel even in the last few days. So we don't know the full extent of the story, but we do know, and we do know it's documented, that Palestinians are dying in huge numbers. And so, of course, that should be the focus. But there's also many things happening at once, and that is the multipolar world is still under siege. It's still being attacked by all means, right? All means it is being attacked at all levels. So we need to make sure that we're paying attention to that too, because that's the big picture here. The big picture is Arab countries, Muslim majority countries, these countries in this part of the global south of West Asia, they are being held back by this military outpost, this settler colony called Israel. And that settler colony right now is out of control. In the United States, the neocons can't get it under control, nor do they really want to. But even just for the optics, humanitarian pause, hey, kill a little fewer. They can't even get that done because there is no respect for the U.S. administration. Why should there be respect? It's a declining empire. Everyone is on their own now. So some are charting a multipolar future. Israel is charting what it sees as its future, which is the final solution. Let's grab everything we can while the going is good, as quick as possible. This is the historical moment we're in. That's why the intensity of this is so magnified. The scale of this is just enormous. And we need to make sure that we're elevating this to the highest level possible of analysis and understanding. Because without that, we are lost. And in this moment, we need more clarity now more than ever. So with that said, the neocons are going to do what they do. The foreign policy establishment is going to do what it does. But the point is that we need to be making sure that we're elevating not just Palestinian self-determination, but the role of Israel as a whole and what function it serves geopolitically for the United States, for the hegemon, and for the region.
Thank you for tuning in to my latest video. I appreciate all of your support. This channel, however, needs your help. I am seeking to make this channel more sustainable in the long term and upgrade necessary equipment to ensure that this work continues onward and makes progress to give you all of the geopolitical analysis that you all deserve. For that reason, I'm asking you to become a member of my Patreon community at patreon.com/DannyHaiphong. You can find that link in the video description or in the pinned comment below. For whatever amount you choose to give, just know you are supporting independent media that you can't find anywhere else. Thank you so much, and I look forward to the next video.